it's just a very, very special car, and I can understand why the world was blown away by it back in the 1970s. Hello guys, and welcome back to the Volkswizard channel. Now, I'll be the first to admit Volkswagen content has been a bit thin on the ground recently, but we're going to put that right over the next few weeks, starting with today's video. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. Now, my love for the Golf GTI started with the Mark II version back in the 1990s, so I effectively overlooked the original GTI, the Mark I. I still sold a few alongside hundreds from the other 7 generations, but today it still remains the generation I know least about. So it's with no small amount of luck that down the road from me is one of the UK's leading Mark I Golf restorers. So today, you and I can go back to where it all began by having a close look at this achingly beautiful Mark I Golf GTI, which just happens to be the earliest UK supplied GTI in existence. Okay, let's start off then with a brief history lesson, because it's very important to understand where this 1977 model sits in the timeline of the Mark I Golf GTI. The first thing to understand is that the 7-year production run can be divided into 2 periods. The Series 1 period ran from launch in 1976 until 1981, and the Series 2 period was from 1981 until the end of production in 1983. The key distinguishing features of an early car are the simpler rear lights, the much more basic dashboard, and the tartan trim, which was reprised for the Mark V. Being one of the earliest GTIs means that, of course, this 77 model is a Series 1, but there is one key difference that made this car particularly rare in the UK. In the spring of 1977, a year after the Mark I Golf GTI was launched in Germany, Volkswagen was still unsure as to whether a right-hand drive version still made economic sense. And initially, the GTI was marketed in left-hand drive format for the UK. This, as you can imagine, meant a very limited audience, and in 78, just 22 were sold, but when right-hand drive models became available in 1979, this grew to over 1,500. A high proportion of the left-hand drive cars ended up being converted for motorsports, and the rest mostly will have succumbed to the early Mark I Golf's Achilles heel, and that is corrosion. It wasn't until 1980 when Volkswagen started wax injecting their cars and giving them a 6-year anti-corrosion warranty like Audi did with the Audi 80. To put it into perspective, 27 years ago, a magazine buying guide for the Mark I GTI stated, if you are contemplating buying a pre-1980 GTI, you can expect it to be either rusty or repaired, restored. And that was 27 years ago. So you can see how remarkable it is we have any of these surviving today. In the mid-1990s, an average Mark I Golf GTI was worth about £600, and to insure it, you'd probably be paying that or more. That's because back in the mid-90s, car theft was really, really bad, and for a short while, GTI stood for Guaranteed Theft Item. As a result, the attrition rate of early GTIs is unusually high for a Volkswagen, so to have this 45-year-old Series 1 stood here in as new condition is nothing short of a miracle. Having the same owner from new until restoration started a couple of years ago undoubtedly helped. That's not because the original owner was super fastidious and maintained the car to perfection, but more that when the amount of work needed to keep it on the road became too much, he didn't just ring up his local scrapyard and tell them to take it away. Nope, sentimentality meant that he just pushed it into his garage with the mower and the bikes and forgot all about it. Fast forward a good many years and the same owner is in Dublin Airport awaiting a flight. He goes into W.H. Smith, and there on the front cover of the October 2019 issue of Practical Classics is a pretty much identical looking Mark 1 Golf GTI, a car that had been restored by the chap who now owns and restored this car, Graham Welch, who's been on this channel before. The original owner sensibly contacts the magazine and says, would Graham want another Mark 1 Golf GTI to restore? And when he found out how significant this car was, how it's the earliest known UK supplied GTI still in existence, he quickly did the deal and brought it back to restore it, and it took a couple of years in the end for it to be completed, and that's the car we have here today. We're very lucky to have this car on the channel. Now Graham kind of knew what to expect because he'd already restored the 1979 model that was on the cover of the magazine, but this car was somewhat more involved, not least because he had to remove 2 rat's nests, but also because some of the parts were very hard to get. Now, just to put this into perspective, even though Mark 1 Golf GTI prices have gone up a lot in recent times, Graham estimates that he spent around 1,000 hours on this car, and if you work that out as an average hourly rate of about £50 an hour, you'll still see that even with prices so high, it really doesn't make economic sense to give an early Mark 1 this level of restoration. So we are very, very lucky that Graham restored this car as a labour of love. So now let me give you a closer look around it and then we'll go for a drive in it. Now before we have a closer look at the 1977 car, seeing as we have a pristine 1980 car here, I thought it might be a good opportunity to show to you the amount of differences between these two cars, considering they're basically the same model. You could make a video, a complete video and more covering all this, but I'm just going to try and condense it into 60 seconds.
The metering head on the 77 is from a Porsche 944, slightly different to the 80. The inlet manifold does just brake servo on the 77, it does oil breather as well on the 80. The top mounts are different. The bonnet stays unpainted on the 77, powder coated on the 80. The bonnet lock is flatter and wider on the 77. The 77 has hooks on the bonnet hinges. The 77 has a VIN plate on the slam panel, the 80 doesn't. The slam panels are slightly different shape. The 80 has 1 bolt for the door hinge, the 77 has 2. The bottom of the A-pillar is slightly different shape. The door seal is a slightly different shape. The 77 has metal door handles with a wooden trim from a 944. The 77 has metal mirrors. The 80 has plastic internally adjustable. 77 has metal bumpers. 80 has plastic wraparound with separate tow hooks. The seatbelt clasps are mounted to the floor on the 77, not to the seat on the 80. The 77 has much thinner stalks. The 77 has a rear wash wipe mounted on the dash. The 77 dash is bolted from underneath, not the side. The 77 has a grab handle.
Right then, who better to give us a tour of this 1977 GTI than the man that restored it, the man that's been on the channel before when we did the 45 years of Golf GTI episode, Graham Welch.
Hi.
Welcome back, Graham. So yeah, you couldn't help yourself then, your second restoration, and yeah, it must have been a real buzz to be offered something so
yes.
special.
Yeah. Well, when the photos came through of the car, and it was a metal bumper car, yeah, it was kind of, couldn't really say no to it.
So metal bumper, straight away you knew it was pre-1979?
Yeah.
As opposed to the plastic wraparounds on this still very early car. So yeah, so you're pretty confident it's, I've got to get this right, the oldest surviving UK supplied GTI. That's known of.
That we know of.
There might be one in the shed somewhere that's covered in dust that might come out of the woodwork. But yeah, currently that's it. There's a bit of a story though, because somebody has got the oldest surviving UK main dealer supplied GTI, because this has got a bit of a backstory, hasn't it, to do with the red stripe around the number plates.
Yes. Well, this was purchased from Volkswagen had what they called the export office, and that was for selling cars that were going to go out of the UK or straight out of the UK. So it was like for the forces, diplomats, or this was sold under the tourist scheme. It was destined for Ireland, but never made it. So the original owner ended up. It was for tax reasons that you could not pay the VAT on the car if it was leaving the country. But this car never left, so it ended up having to have the VAT paid on it. The red surround around the number plates was to specify that it hadn't had the VAT paid on it, which you see on some ex-forces cars, that they carry that red surround.
They're probably not on the car for very long, are they? Because once you've exported it, you've changed the number plate.
Yeah, exactly.
So for them to have survived 45 years, it's quite incredible.
It's almost like a trade number plate.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So it still sits on its original London number plate.
Yeah. And it's on steel wheels, which there's a bit of confusion as to what's correct for when. So tell us.
Yeah, these were a standard item on the very first GTIs in the UK, right through to the end of '79. When they went to the 5-speed and the 80 model, then the alloys became standard. Which
we have right here. So these are, they're called Audi 80 wheels, but they're slightly different, aren't they? But the same size as the steels, 175 7013 tyres, which is tiny, and 13-inch alloys. So they look great, but there's something about this small bumper, metal bumper car and the steel wheels. It just looks so.
It's like
nice.
Almost like a minimalist look.
Yeah. Certain angles.
They're a bit easier to clean too.
I can imagine. Yeah, those are really intricate. Tell us about the tyres, because they're a bit period.
The tyres. Pirelli are doing. They do limited runs of these sort of classic tyres. These are called the CN36 tyre. They were fitted on the car when it was new. So they are correct for the car.
They're quite expensive though, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They're probably double the price of a sort of a standard modern 175 7013 equivalent. But the grip is exceptional with them. And they've got a higher. You struggle to get the speed rating on such a small tyre. On the modern tyres, they don't have the correct speed rating. Of course,
because there aren't any performance cars.
Performance cars, exactly that.
Yeah. Okay, should we have a look inside, because that's where it's distinctly different to 99.9% of the Mark 1 GTIs to come to the UK. So there we have a steering wheel on the wrong side.
Depends what market you're in.
Yeah.
They obviously didn't introduce the right-hand drive till 1979. So this is 77. So this car's a full 2 years before they were brought into the UK. Differences: it has like small stalks. It's like Beetle-esque stalks on the column. The rear wash wipe switch is separate, which is down underneath the dashboard there.
Yeah, it's normally on a stalk, isn't it?
Normally on the stalk.
Yeah.
It's got an extra grab handle on the passenger side.
That's the only grab handle apart from the hoops, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got the hoops on the B pillar.
Yeah, sure. Beetle originally.
Whether this is, I don't know if that's GTI specific or whether that's just model specific. The door hinges are earlier on these cars.
Yep. There's so much detail change. It's unbelievable, really. Generally, when a car's brought to market, it stays that way until a facelift.
Yeah.
And you'd facelift it like they did with the bigger rear lights, different wheels, bigger bumpers. But no, they just couldn't help themselves. It was almost like it came to market too early, and they were still refining it every opportunity they could do with all these little changes.
Yeah, even the stitching on the front seats is slightly different. On the later cars, they had like a piping down this edge here, and also this vinyl wasn't on the later cars. The material went over the back, but this is like a double stitched rather than But interestingly, the rear has the piping, but the front doesn't.
I see. What? Just there,
Yeah.
Okay, and that's different to the 80, because on the 80 it's fabric.
80, the material comes over the top.
It's got basically one less piece of fabric, hasn't it? Because that's just
And then the seat belts anchors are bolted to the floor, whereas on the 80 model they're actually bolted to the seat frame.
Yeah. It's worth pointing this out because it's weird anyway when they're attached to the seat, but there's no buckle on this seat belt. You'll reach for one and never find one because you run it across you and then just push that down, and that was the solution back then. Now on this car, as Graham said, this is attached to the floor on the later car, trying to be more modern I guess, they're kind of fixed with a bracket to the seat base, so they move with, they're always in the same place regardless of where the seat is.
It's this model, or this car doesn't have the glove box lid.
Yeah, that's interesting for a performance car. It wouldn't take much performance to chuck out the contents on the passenger's lap, would it?
Forever picking the bits up out off the floor that you put in the glove box. Saves weight, I think.
Yeah, it's just an interesting kind of car in that it's so basic, and they didn't really think about making it more luxurious in any way. It was, I mean, we didn't even have internally adjustable mirrors on this car, which we got on the 80. Yeah, brilliant.
On the tailgate, I can open the tailgate. It's just, this is like this isn't GTI specific, but the parcel shelf mounts are slightly different, a lot basic, and they don't have the speaker grills that the later cars had.
Show us under that carpet, because generally on Mark 1s they're horrible and manky, aren't they?
It's not too bad.
Look at that, guys. That is what a full restoration gets you. Incredible. Right, before you very kindly let me go for a drive in this, just show me what they did with the 1980 with the switches to make them work for the right-hand drive cars. Because I think, guys, you'll enjoy this, because it just shows you how, I don't know, how just maybe the right-hand drive market wasn't that important to Volkswagen at the time, even though later we became the biggest market for GTIs. I just find this quite amusing. So here we have 1980 model year, right-hand drive from the factory, and even though it was factory done, we still have funny bits like those switches.
So yeah, the indicator, there's a little light for the fog light.
Yeah, to show you that you've got it on.
Indicator light that it's on.
Yeah.
But it's kind of back to front because the driver needs to see it. So Volkswagen fitted the left-hand drive switches upside down. That's so brilliant. The actual graphics for the fog light are pointing upwards.
That's more obvious with the heated rear window one as well.
And
on
then
the right,
the heated rear window is the same, because you've got the little indicator light to say that it's on. The arrows for the demist sort of pointing in the downward position. And then also on the, this is probably more subjective, but the actual light switch itself, normally that would be on a normal switch, that it would be the on position. But on this car, that's the on position for the headlights, because the whole switch is inverted 180 degrees. So rather than make a special switch for the right-hand drive cars, they just decided to turn them upside down.
Did they sort that out with the Series 2 that we have over there?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, they redesigned the switches for the Series 2. Yeah, it's only these early Series 1s that you get that.
Okay, before we nerd out any more, can I go and drive the oldest GTI, UK supplied GTI in the country?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure for you to take it for a drive.
Okay guys, here we are inside the oldest surviving UK supplied GTI, and it's quite a familiar place to me. It's not totally dissimilar to the Mark IIs, it's still quite similar to the later Mark Is. It reminds me of my Mark II Polo, which was my very first car. There's not an awful lot here to talk about. We do have an oil temperature gauge in the centre console made by VDO, and next to that we have a clock, which is interesting because there is no other clock. There's no LCD displays with the time on like on the later dashboard. No stereo, no glove box lid. It's very basic, but this car is all about the driving, so let's do that. Firstly then, let's put the seatbelt on, which feels pretty normal till you realise there's no metal clasp on there. You just lock it into place with these floor mounted things, which on this early car, as I mentioned earlier, are just attached to the floor. They're not attached to the seat, so yeah, they're in a good position for me though. We've just got a normal Volkswagen key, no funny immobilizers on this car. So let's just press the clutch and fire up, starts keenly. Gearbox then, so we've got a golf ball gear knob. We don't have the gear gate in the top of it like on some later cars. And that's quite important because if you look for a fifth gear, you will not find one. This is an early car with a 4-speed box that continued for a couple of years after this one. Handbrake, just a metal thing down here. It feels good though, not much travel really. One couple of clicks and it feels really tight, so that feels like a good handbrake. That's nice. It's idling away smoothly, just under 1,000 RPM, and it's not shaking the car. It does feel like a very kind of refined car at this point, but what's it like on the go? Well, let's find out. So yeah, clutch feels pretty light. Normal bite is about halfway up, and I've stalled it. That is me, not the car though. So yeah, let's just give it a few more revs and off we go. And yeah, gearbox is long, but it feels actually quite precise. Now we've got longer gears in this car, which you might think with just 110 horsepower might make it feel sluggish, but I don't think so. It's got a distinct kick at about 5,000 RPM, even though it's just an 8-valve engine. And even pulling third, it still feels quite eager. The good news is we do have brakes in this car as well, and that's because it is a left-hand drive car. One of the compromises with the UK Mark 1s, let me just put it into fourth, is that the brake servo stayed on this side, so you're over here pressing the pedal, it's attached with a linkage to the servo over here. Well, on this left-hand drive car it is in the best position, and that makes the brakes, as I will demonstrate now, actually work quite well. I probably could have pressed a bit harder then as well. So yeah, you might be sitting on the wrong side of the road, it might make overtaking a bit harder, but you do have brakes that work a lot better. But yeah, the steering, it's quite light on the go. In fact, actually at stationary it's not particularly heavy. It does take quite a bit of turning of the wheel to get the car around though. At this hill, we're in third gear now. It's not the torquiest of engines, but it's quite happy pulling third. I don't trust the speedo though. It says we're doing 90 kilometers an hour, which is something like about 60 miles an hour, but I'm pretty sure we're not. But yeah, in third, it's quite eager. It's not a refined car on the move though. Okay, it's got the same top gear as the 5-speed, but even that's quite buzzy. But remember, it's a sports car. It's from the 1970s, this car, so it's what you'd expect at the time. But what you don't expect is this sort of level of performance really. This was a bolt out of the blue back in the 1970s. And it's so light, it's under a ton, so it just, even though it's got, you know, quite soft suspension, it does roll a lot. There's not an awful lot of weight transfer on roads like this. Yes, you soon learn to trust it. Okay, it rolls a bit. If you just stepped out of a modern car like I have, it does feel a bit loose, but yeah, it's just a very, very special car, and I can understand why the world was blown away by it back in the 1970s. And just think what it started. Just think what it started. So guys, that is the very early Mark 1 Golf GTI. I've filled in a lot of my knowledge over the Mark 1s today with this car, so big thanks to Graham. Hopefully you've learned a lot as well, and yeah, if you've enjoyed this video as ever, give it a thumbs up, do share it, and please do subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you like these kind of videos, if you want more Volkswagen content, if you want more diverse content, let me know. I'll make whatever you guys want, and yeah, see you for the next video very soon.